In a suburban landscape defined by bland conformity, all beige siding, manicured lawns, and silent, passive-aggressive judgment, my Challenger was an anomaly. It was a bright, roaring piece of American muscle, a kinetic expression of freedom that drew attention, and inevitably, the wrong kind. For me, it was more than just metal and horsepower. It was the result of years of hard work, a source of pride, and a clear statement that I wouldn't surrender my identity to the silent rules of the HOA community. But for Karen, and more specifically, for her son, Jack, it was a constant, glaring offense. Karen saw the car's vibrant color and loud engine as an act of rebellion against her vision of immaculate, sterile order. Jack, however, saw it as a symbol of the success he felt he was owed, a prize that should rightfully belong to him. Jack was a self-entitled brat of 20, riddled with a chip on his shoulder the size of a spare tire and a constant, festering need for external validation. He had been raised to believe that the world, and specifically his mother's influence, would always smooth his path. The feud started small, like most suburban conflicts do. Passive-aggressive notes appeared anonymously on my windshield about excessive noise at ungodly hours. Unfounded parking complaints were filed with the new board members' complaints that went nowhere. Thankfully, but the real tension resided in Jack's constant, lingering stares. I'd catch him across the street, his eyes tracing the clean lines of the Challenger parked in my driveway, his expression a toxic mix of envy and simmering rage. Karen, of course, amplified his resentment, loudly complaining at community meetings that my car's mere presence lowered the aesthetic standard of the block, even though it was perfectly legal. The conflict wasn't just about a noisy engine. It was about the profound boundary Jack felt entitled to cross. He didn't just want a car like mine. He wanted mine. He wanted to own the pride he saw in my eyes. The tension wasn't going to resolve itself with a polite conversation. It was heading toward a collision, violent and entirely predictable. I wasn't foolish. I knew what kind of resentment was brewing, and I took precautions. My Challenger wasn't just protected by a standard alarm. It was equipped with a discreet, multi-layered security system. This included a high-end, military-grade GPS tracker hidden deep within the vehicle's frame, linked directly to a private security firm specializing in high-value vehicle recovery. This system was designed to bypass the traditional 911 bottleneck and feed real-time coordinates directly to law enforcement dispatch. I had prepared for the possibility of malice, but I never imagined the sheer stupidity of the perpetrator. Jack, in his arrogance, was convinced that any crime he committed would be nothing more than a minor administrative hiccup his mother could fix with a check and a phone call. He assumed car alarms were all the same loud, annoying, and easily disabled. He had no idea he was dealing with a system designed to treat my vehicle like a priority asset, or that every revolution of the tires was being tracked by a silent, uncompromising network. The theft occurred in the dead of night. I wasn't jolted awake by a blaring siren, which Jack had expertly disabled. Instead, my phone, resting quietly on my nightstand, flashed with a subtle, chilling notification. Vehicle moved beyond geofence perimeter. Initiate protocol. My heart hammered against my ribs with a cold, shocking certainty. I ran to the window. The driveway was empty. My car, my pride, my symbol of hard work, was gone. It wasn't just stolen. It was a personal attack, and I knew, with absolute certainty, exactly who had taken it. This wasn't a professional job. This was personal, stupid, and driven by pure, entitled spite. My immediate call was not to 911, which would have put me into a queue. Instead, I called the direct line to my security firm, giving them the authorization to immediately activate the highest level of GPS tracking and alerting the police with precise, live coordinates. My voice was calm but firm as I provided the necessary details. I made it explicitly clear to the dispatcher. This wasn't just Grand Theft Auto. This was the culmination of a months-long campaign of harassment by the HOA Karen and her delinquent son. The car was already miles away, speeding toward a destination that would be far worse than prison, the inescapable, permanent spotlight of public humiliation. He had no idea that by taking my car, he had volunteered to star in the definitive, recorded performance of his own catastrophic downfall. My Challenger wasn't just a fast car. It was, by design, a technological fortress wrapped in Detroit muscle. Jack, in his pathetic attempt at criminal genius, had focused all his effort on defeating the simple alarm system and overriding the ignition, assuming that once the engine roared to life, he was untouchable. He assumed this was a simple game of hide-and-seek with local patrol cars. He had no idea that he was now running a live, broadcast target for a sophisticated, nationwide recovery network. The GPS unit I had installed wasn't some cheap aftermarket gadget. It was a military-grade transponder, small, virtually undetectable, and hidden deep within the vehicle's frame, specifically chosen to withstand signal jamming and amateur detection devices. It was the best money could buy, and its effectiveness was about to be proven in the most public way possible. This unit was linked directly to a specialized, private security firm's central monitoring system. This firm bypasses the typical, bureaucratic 911 bottleneck, going straight to a coordination center that has the authority and the technical capability to feed real-time coordinates directly to police dispatch in multiple jurisdictions. The moment the alert pinged on my phone, the system was already operational. Within 60 seconds of my authorization, my car was being tracked with a precision that would make a predator drone envious. Every revolution of the tires, every sudden lane change, every foolish acceleration was being instantaneously fed to a system designed to treat my vehicle like a priority asset, because, in a high-stakes theft, time isn't money. It's the difference between recovery and a total loss. Jack, in his arrogant bubble of entitlement, assumed all car alarms were loud, annoying, and easily disabled. He had no idea he had essentially signed a contract to have his crime professionally documented from start to finish. This wasn't a simple car theft. It was a criminal running a live, tracked target for a final, catastrophic confrontation. When my security team passed the live tracking feed to the police, the local jurisdiction realized immediately that this wasn't a standard patrol car job. This was a high-speed pursuit already in motion, stretching across county lines. The local police acted swiftly, but intelligently. They didn't rush in blindly, risking a dangerous, high-speed chase through populated areas. Instead, they recognized the invaluable asset they had: perfect, real-time location data. The key to our success lay in a pre-existing interagency agreement that allowed for the immediate deployment of a state highway patrol helicopter unit for high-priority theft cases on the interstate. The air unit was launched within minutes. This wasn't merely a transport helicopter. This was a multi-million-dollar surveillance platform, equipped with powerful infrared cameras and high-definition long-range optics. Jack was pushing my stolen vehicle to reckless speeds, but he was completely unaware that he wasn't just being chased by flashing lights on the ground. He was being hunted from above by an invisible, unblinking eye. The deployment of the air unit fundamentally changed the dynamics of the pursuit. For the police, it meant two critical things. First, the chase would be infinitely safer for the public, as ground units could back off and simply follow the air unit's lead, avoiding risky, high-speed maneuvers. Second, and most devastating for Jack, every single second of his crime, his face, his erratic driving, and his eventual capture would be recorded in crystal clear, incontrovertible high-definition video footage. He hadn't just stolen a car. He had unknowingly agreed to star in the definitive, recorded performance of his own catastrophic downfall. The helicopter unit, maintaining a safe, high altitude, was able to track my Challenger flawlessly as Jack pushed it onto the interstate. From their vantage point, the powerful muscle car was a distinct, fast-moving target on the map, a beacon of light in the pre-dawn traffic. The air unit's thermal camera systems negated any attempt he might make to hide in shadows or use fog as cover. Every reckless move he made, weaving dangerously through early morning commuters, suddenly accelerating and decelerating, was captured and time-stamped with undeniable accuracy. The air unit pilot and the camera operator were acting not just as law enforcement, but as forensic documentarians, building a mountain of evidence one reckless mile at a time. I was kept updated in real time by my security firm. I wasn't watching the chase live, but I was receiving the chilling play-by-play. Subject traveling eastbound on I-75. Speed in excess of 110 miles per hour. Erratic lane change near exit 43. With every update, my anger solidified into a cold, unwavering focus on justice. I knew that Karen's son, driven by his lifetime of entitlement, was digging a hole so deep that not even his mother's money or influence could possibly pull him out. He was driving a highly visible, distinct car, a literal beacon of criminality, making his attempts to blend in pathetically futile. The deployment of the helicopter was the final, critical piece of the puzzle. Without that aerial perspective, Jack might have ditched the car in a parking garage or a dense industrial district, creating reasonable doubt and prolonging the legal headache. But with the eye of justice fixed firmly overhead, his options dwindled to zero. He was now on a predetermined, aerial leash, heading directly into the prepared legal trap. He was burning up the gas tank. Yes, but what he was truly burning was the last shred of his reputation, his freedom, and the belief that the rules simply didn't apply to him. The setup was complete, the net was cast, and the high-stakes action of the chase was about to begin. Jack drove with the reckless confidence of a person who has never faced a consequence in his life. He pushed the Challenger to its absolute limit on the interstate, the car's powerful engine, which I had spent years meticulously tuning, now screaming in protest under the hands of a thief. He wove dangerously through the heavy morning traffic, his adrenaline masking the stark, inevitable reality that was closing in on him. His mind was focused entirely on the rearview mirror, searching for the flashing red and blue lights of ground units. He was operating on the fundamental, ignorant assumption that if he couldn't see the police, they couldn't see him. But above him, relentless and silent, the eye of justice, the State Highway Patrol helicopter followed without a hitch. From the ground, patrol cars were visible, their lights flashing, but they kept a safe, strategic distance, their speed dictated by the air unit's continuous feed. The pursuing ground units weren't running a blind pursuit. They were simply following the GPS coordinates transmitted from the sky. This was the terrifying efficiency of modern law enforcement combined with high-tech surveillance, and Jack had absolutely no countermeasure. He was a beacon of light in the pre-dawn traffic, a bright orange target on the thermal cameras, and his every foolish decision was being logged for the prosecution. He tried every maneuver he had ever seen in cheap action movies. He suddenly decelerated, hoping the tailing cars would overshoot. He sped up again, weaving aggressively across multiple lanes, forcing civilian drivers to brake hard and swerve. He was generating chaos, not escape. But every one of those reckless, life-threatening maneuvers was captured in crystal-clear high definition from 500 feet above. The camera operator in the air unit was calm, the lens fixed on the Challenger, providing a clinical, minute-by-minute narrative of his felony in progress. Jack was burning up the gas tank. Yes, but what he was truly burning was his entire future. 1 mile at a time, the smug entitlement that had driven him to steal the car was now fueling the very vehicle that was delivering him to prison. The chase intensified as Jack continued his high-speed folly, heading straight for the nearest major city, believing he could lose himself in its dense, anonymous streets. The police knew this was his plan. He was running the predictable playbook of a desperate amateur. But then, driven by blind panic and his self-appointed belief in his own luck, he made a critical, catastrophic error. Seeing an exit ramp looming, Jack suddenly cut across 3 lanes of traffic, narrowly avoiding a massive collision, and plunged off the interstate, heading directly into an older, dense downtown district. This was his fatal mistake. He thought the vertical landscape, the tall buildings, the narrow alleys would break the line of sight for the police cars, allowing him to dump the car and disappear on foot. What he failed to realize was that in an urban environment, the helicopter's advantage becomes absolute and undeniable. The streets were too narrow, the corners too sharp, and the traffic lights too numerous for the powerful Challenger. The car, designed for wide-open highways, became a bright, expensive target trapped in a labyrinth. The helicopter, meanwhile, simply maintained its altitude, now acting as a relentless, orbiting sentinel. The buildings didn't shield him. They just provided the perfect, geometric frame for his capture. The air unit's camera, utilizing its incredible zoom and thermal imaging, followed him relentlessly as he ran red lights, swerved around buses, and terrified pedestrians. Every illegal turn, every near miss with a civilian vehicle, was logged as a separate felony count of reckless endangerment. The entitlement that had convinced him he could steal my property now convinced him he could defy physics and law enforcement. He started making desperate, circular maneuvers, whipping through the same streets, trying to confuse his unseen pursuer. It was a pathetic, visible farce. The constant presence of the hovering air unit, the sound of its rotor blades filling the pre-dawn air, was a physical reminder that he was cornered, hunted, and exposed. His reign of reckless, entitled destruction came to an abrupt, final stop at a major intersection. Trapped by the sudden appearance of heavy cross-traffic and boxed in by two patrol cars that finally moved in from separate directions, Jack had nowhere left to go. The helicopter's powerful spotlight, the eye of justice, locked onto the stolen car, illuminating the scene like a stage for his final, humiliating takedown. He had played his last hand, and the evidence of his crime was already safely recorded, time-stamped, and ready to be used to ruin his life. Just as his HOA Karen mother had ruined the lives of so many others with her smaller, more petty acts of corruption, Jack's high-speed folly came to a brutal, definitive end at a massive downtown intersection. Trapped by the sudden surge of morning traffic and boxed in by 3 police patrol cars that finally moved in from separate directions, he had nowhere left to go. The roar of the Challenger's engine died a pathetic sputter as the keys were dropped and his foot slammed on the brake. The air unit, that invisible hunter, immediately locked its powerful spotlight onto the car, illuminating the entire scene like a stage for his final, embarrassing performance. The sight of the police closing in, the relentless sound of the helicopter blades chopping the air directly above him, and the blinding spotlight finally shattered the facade of his entitlement. Jack, the arrogant son of the HOA Karen, slumped in the driver's seat. His youthful bravado evaporated, replaced by the profound, visceral fear of a child who realizes his mother cannot fix this. The police moved with swift, overwhelming efficiency, weapons drawn, shouting commands that cut through the silence following the roar of the chase. As the officers hauled Jack out of the Challenger, the visual evidence of his struggle was undeniable. He resisted, yelling and pulling against the uniformed officers. He wasn't resisting arrest because he was innocent. He was resisting the consequences he had been raised to believe he was immune from. But the defining moment, the one that revealed the true, pathetic core of his personality, came as the cold steel of the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Looking up at the overwhelming spotlight, and surrounded by the tangible evidence of his felony, Jack's entitled arrogance finally broke. He immediately started screaming not legal protests, but a desperate, primal yell for the one person who had enabled his entire life of crime. "Mom, call my mom, call Karen." That pathetic cry was captured by the sensitive microphone of the hovering air unit, a final, definitive piece of audio evidence of his emotional dependence and lack of moral responsibility. He had gambled his freedom on the lie that his mother's money could buy him out of any mess, and in that moment, the lie was exposed for the world to hear. He wasn't just facing a fine, he was facing felony grand theft auto, reckless endangerment, and the full, unyielding weight of the state's judicial system. His humiliation was absolute, and every single second of it was recorded. The state's attorney knew they had a strong case, but the evidence delivered immediately after the arrest elevated it to an absolute slam dunk. The most devastating piece of evidence wasn't the stolen car, it was the entire, unedited, high-definition recording from the state police helicopter. The air unit crew immediately handed over the raw footage, a clean, clinical, and minute-by-minute account of a felony in progress, capturing his driving, his face, his reckless indifference to human life, and his pathetic apprehension. In the weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing, the helicopter footage became the centerpiece of the prosecution strategy. This wasn't some blurry dashcam video with conflicting perspectives. It was a clear, undeniable visual narrative. It showed Jack pushing my challenger to speeds well over 100 miles per hour, weaving dangerously, running red lights, and the final, stupid move into the urban trap. Karen, predictably, went into hysterics. She immediately hired the most expensive defense attorney her HOA fortune could buy, confident that money, as it always had, would solve this inconvenient criminal mess. She flew into a rage when she realized she couldn't simply make the footage disappear. Her lawyer, a smooth-talking veteran, watched the full video during discovery with me and my own attorney present. I watched the color drain from his face as the relentless, unblinking helicopter camera documented his client's stupidity. He saw the clear shots of Jack's face, the precise documentation of his speed and recklessness, and the absolute lack of any ambiguity regarding his intent and endangerment. There were no grounds for reasonable doubt. There were no possibilities for a successful motion to suppress. There would be no technical loophole his mother's corruption or money could buy him. The footage didn't just document the crime. It utterly crushed the defense before it even had a chance to breathe life. Karen's arrogance had led her son to steal a car equipped with a system designed to treat him like a criminal priority, and the evidence was a cinematic masterpiece of his failure. The realization in the courtroom, during the preliminary hearing, was palpable. Jack, cleaned up and dressed in a cheap suit, sat next to his lawyer. When the prosecutor played the key segments of the video, the sudden, dangerous swerves on the interstate, the near misses with innocent drivers, and the final, humiliating takedown, Jack couldn't look up. He stared at the floor, silent and defeated, the recorded image of his criminal arrogance playing over his head. His lawyer leaned over and whispered to him, not objections, but the harsh, cold truth of his limited options. The system of justice was finally prevailing, and it was using Jack's own reckless behavior as the primary witness against him. My quiet, cold satisfaction in that moment was the purest form of justice I could ever have asked for. The helicopter had done its job. It tracked the truth, and it delivered the evidence with relentless, aerial precision. The state's attorney knew they had an unassailable case, and Karen's high-priced defense attorney knew it too. Faced with the mountain of evidence, most of it captured on the high-definition helicopter camera, their only remaining option was damage control. They pushed for a last-minute plea deal, hoping to avoid the public spectacle of a full trial and the inevitable maximum sentence. The prosecution, however, understood the severity of the crime. The high-speed chase had endangered dozens of civilian lives, and they refused to let Jack off easy. They wanted the full weight of the law to send a clear message. The case went to trial, and it was swift. The jury was composed of ordinary citizens, many of them homeowners who understood the value of property and the need for public safety. They were shown the footage, they heard the testimony from the air unit crew, and they watched as the video meticulously documented Jack's entitlement turning into outright criminality. The defense's pitiful attempts to frame Jack as a misguided youth were immediately dismantled by the cold, irrefutable time-stamped evidence. The deliberation was astonishingly brief. The jury returned within hours. The silence in the courtroom when the jury foreperson stood to read the verdict was absolute, tense, and heavy with the culmination of months of harassment and fear. The words echoed clearly: guilty on felony grand theft auto, guilty on reckless endangerment. The sentence was severe, a significant term in state prison. Jack's entitled life came to an end the moment the judge delivered the judgment. But the legal sentence was only half the story. The true punishment, the one that broke Karen entirely, came when the helicopter footage, the undeniable, humiliating record of her son's capture, was released to the media as a public safety warning about the dangers of high-speed chases. The footage went viral immediately. It was broadcast across every major local news station, shared endlessly on social media, and discussed on national talk shows. Jack, the entitled son of the HOA Karen who thought he could steal impunity, became an instant, permanent meme, a cautionary tale whose terrified, Handcuffed face was now synonymous with criminal arrogance. Karen tried every avenue to have the footage suppressed, filing ludicrous motions and demanding its removal from the internet, only succeeding in magnifying its reach. Her desperate attempts to use her money and influence to bury the truth only created more headlines, more shame, and more exposure of her family's complete moral bankruptcy. Her power in the community evaporated entirely. Her name, once synonymous with mere pettiness, was now stained with felony and humiliation. The homeowners of the neighborhood finally had the justice they deserved, delivered not by a lawsuit, but by a high-definition video. The conviction of her son marked the definitive end of Karen's tyrannical rule. The relentless public scrutiny, the humiliation of the viral footage, and the realization that her life of entitlement had finally led to a crushing defeat were too much for her to bear. Her attempts to use the HOA to maintain control failed spectacularly. The remaining board members, the ones who had protected her and enabled her petty corruption, were immediately subjected to overwhelming pressure from the community. Faced with mass resignations and the threat of civil lawsuits, the entire, corrupt structure of the HOA crumbled overnight. Karen moved out shortly after the sentencing. She was unable to withstand the constant scrutiny, the pointed looks, and the pervasive shame that now clung to her like cheap perfume. Her quick, final departure, without fanfare or dignity, was the ultimate sign of her power's dissolution. It was a victory not just for me, but for every neighbor she had ever intimidated, fined, or harassed. My challenger was recovered, repaired, and returned to my driveway, a symbol of freedom and resilience. But the neighborhood was fundamentally changed for the better. The air of hostility finally cleared, replaced by a sense of genuine collaboration. A new HOA board was democratically elected by a massive turnout of homeowners demanding real transparency and accountability. They scrapped the old, arbitrary rules, instituted clear financial audits, and prioritized the well-being of the residents over the petty demands of a few entitled individuals. The isolation I had felt dissolved, replaced by a true sense of community unity. I learned that the best defense against a bully isn't just a lawyer. It's patience, preparation, and undeniable, unassailable evidence. The helicopter didn't just track my car, it tracked the truth, and it delivered justice with relentless, aerial precision. I survived the harassment, the threat, and the attempted theft, and in doing so, I helped dismantle a system of corruption that had plagued the neighborhood for years. And sometimes, the sweetest form of revenge is simply the quiet, smooth purr of your car engine, safe in your own driveway, knowing the bully who coveted it is locked away and their reign is over. The only lasting legacy Karen and her son left behind was a viral video, a mugshot, and a clear, enduring reminder that entitlement is a dead-end street.